Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here for our session, our special session on the church and AI. I know it's quite a quick turnaround, so you've done well to get lunch down the hatch and make it here for 1 o'clock. And we're really pleased, obviously, that you guys are here. And I've caught up with some of our brilliant panel on Zoom in recent weeks. And I've got to be honest, we're into a subject I don't know a heap about, so I'm very much sitting on the learning side of the fence today. But I can honestly and genuinely say that I was very inspired by our conversations, and I'm looking forward to this session. So I'm sure it's going to be helpful, it's going to be informative. And what I'd like to do is we've got 3 guys. I won't do all their names. I do know them, just in case you think I'm just blagging it. I do know their names, but I want them to introduce themselves and come and tell us a little bit about themselves as well. And so 3 great guys going to be involved, going to be a brilliant time, and it's going to be super helpful. So why don't you jump up, fellas, and just come and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then I'm going to hand over to Matt to take it from there. Why don't we welcome them today as they come to lead this session for us?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Richard Newbold, one of the leaders of Ipswich Community Church, which is why we're involved as that leadership together. I'm not the main person. I'm not an expert in AI, though I have worked for 30 years in IT, so with systems that gather a lot of data, work across the internet, automate services for people. I spent some time looking at what the core of artificial intelligence systems is about. It's something called machine learning, so I can offer some perspective. I think this afternoon, though, is about us discussing these perspectives. So I'm concerned as a church leader also for the impact of artificial intelligence on society, on what that's going to mean for church members, and that we approach it with faith and get God's wisdom for how to navigate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Phil Bolton, and part of this stunning leadership team at Ipswich Community Church. And I'm a mobile dog groomer, so I have a lot of knowledge on this subject, which you'll learn about as we go through this hour together. So like Darryl, really, I'm here to learn a bit more from other people who are better equipped than I in this subject. Been married for 40 years. My wife is turning 60 shortly. We have we have 2 little dogs that we don't have to groom, which is good. Anyway, that's enough about me. Matt.
Thanks, everyone. My name's Matt James, the third member of the Trinity at ICC, along with Richard and Phil. And great to be with you this afternoon. This is the conversation space, and so we really do want to host a conversation. But I'm mindful that it's a topic that, for some of you might have read a little bit about, and may be quite interested in, and that's why you've come along. Alternatively, you might think, actually, I know very little about this, but I know it's really important, and so I want to try and learn how to be more engaged. For others of you might have thought, I can't decide which other seminar to go to, so I'll come to this one. So that is quite a big remit to try and do a session, but I really do hope that this afternoon will start a conversation that you can then continue with your friends, family, and the church. Quick little bit about me. I'm married to the lovely Debbie. Uncle to the lovely Trinity. I happen to be, I work with this stuff quite a bit. I'm a professor in bioethics and medical law at London University, and have the privilege of being able to teach and think about that from a Christian perspective. We're an inclusive Catholic university in St Mary's in southwest London. And so opportunities to think about these kind of big questions. As my wife says, when people ask me what I do, and I say that, she often goes, phew. But hopefully trying to help people think about the future and what it means to be human in the future is my day job. So what we hope to try and do, because it's such a big topic and it's I think, an interesting topic, for some of you who may have seen the news reports that are coming out almost on a steadily basis now, what to make of it. And so what I hope to take you on is a metaphorical helicopter journey for the 10, 15 minutes. We're going to kind of fly up and take a kind of a top level view, and I'm going to try and point out some of the key features, the important bits that I think would be worth you noting and being aware of, for us then to move into some time talking in our smaller groups. It's great to see so many with you this afternoon. In smaller groups where I think sometimes it's a bit more easier to talk and to share thoughts, and then have a bit of a panel discussion at the end. So it's not just all of just one person talking and a few questions at the end. We hope to be able to have a conversation in various forms as we go through this afternoon. So without any further ado, if we can switch to the Mentimeter slide. Guys on the desk are doing a great job. What I just wanted to hear from you is what words or phrases spring to mind when you hear the phrase artificial intelligence. We're going to try and work with technology. So if you have a mobile or a device and it's internet enabled, if you go to www.menti.com and input the code, which I'm going to have to read to you because it's really small on these screens, 4312 5771. I'll read that again. 4312 5771. Okay, Menti, so M for Matthew, E for elephant, N for nut, T for telephone, I for indigo, .com. And then your magic code to get in, 4312 5771. And you can add your suggestions. And as you can see before our very eyes, we're having a word cloud create itself for us with some of the ideas. And it's just good to hear and to see some of the ideas and the immediate thoughts, reactions that spring to mind when you hear the word artificial intelligence appear. Now, if we had bigger screens, this would be even better, but I have a solution to that, which I'll let you in at the end, and the technology disappears. There we go. So, a rough science, the bigger the words, the more of you are saying that kind of thing. So we are seeing here, if I interpret for you, robot is quite firm and central, opportunity, automation, ChatGPT, Big Brother, Apocalypse, Antichrist was there, one of them, automations, unemployment, cheating, imitating others, good and bad, job losses, counterfeit preachers, machines that learn. So yeah, some really good suggestions there and thoughts and reactions. And it's good to see that, because for a topic like this, you might think, I know very little, and yet you have a response. It stirs a response in all of us. And that is just one deep fake coming out quite strongly as well there. It sparks a response in all of us. So you might not feel that you're an expert, but you certainly have a view. This is affecting all of us in different ways. And it's great to just capture some of that. And I have a way of sharing that end result with you, and I'll say that a little bit more about that towards the end. So thank you. If we could switch over from Mentimeter to the slides now, great. Seamless transition. So what is AI? Well, as many of you have already proven, you've got your devices, you can find various definitions online. But just to help us this afternoon, I think one, which is a fairly kind of succinct and clear, artificial intelligence can be defined as making a machine behave in ways that would be called intelligent if a human were so behaving. So it's kind of making a machine behave in a human-like manner. And focus very often it falls on creating a computer mind, in inverted commas, that thinks like a human. That's led on to, in more recent decades, and in many respects, it's not, well, I'll come on to that. It's not a new thing, but what's happened more recently is this rise and talk about intelligent machines and machine learning. Very often, as we saw from our word cloud, AI is talked about in relation to artificial intelligence and robotics. And the word robot comes from a Czech term for servitude, for being a servant, which is interesting when we come to think about the role of AI, who's serving who. But robot, 1920 Czech term for servitude, to serve. And so a robot could be understood to be a machine that's capable of carrying out a series of actions automatically, often that was a work that was previously undertaken by a human. And so we see robotics and AI working together to kind of create this intelligent machine. So say top level, others of you perhaps in the room that are engaged in this, working in it, probably could drill down deeper, understand it in a deeper sense. But a kind of a top level form, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about AI and robotics. Quick shout out to humanoids, which we'll see on screen here. These are androids or humanoids that have a human-like appearance. And that's probably a type of image that might spring to mind when you think about AI and robotics. Very popular in Japan and in Asia. Anyone like to suggest why, perhaps, in Japan and Asia they're more prone to build humanoids and are open to kind of human-like structures and devices? It's because in their culture they're quite happy and at ease to give innate objects like computers almost a personality, a soul, a living spirit. Whilst in the West and in Europe, in Asia, very much linked to our Judeo-Christian roots about being made in the image of God, that kind of tends to conjure up a bit of a yuck factor. We're not quite happy about that. But Japan, they're quite into their humanoids, whilst in the West and in Europe, States and so forth, we're very much into kind of intelligent systems, AI devices, smart homes, the Internet of Things, if things can do our Alexas and Siris and so forth. A device or something like that, that works for us. Putting a human face to things, we're a little bit more uneasy about. So a bit of an overview as to what it is. Sometimes it's even easier to say, well, what AI isn't, to then begin to give a bit more detail. What AI is not, it's not particularly new. Actually, it could be dated back to 1956 at the Dartmouth College, a big university in the States where there was a conversation taking place about AI and the term kind of came into existence. Roots could be further than that, but it's not a relatively new term. It's been around for some time. When we're thinking about kind of the artificial side of things, it's not really artificial. It has very real consequences in our world today, and we'll see some examples very shortly. It's not very intelligent. Some of you may have encountered those instances with kind of GPS systems saying, you can go down that road, and no, you can't, because it's a one-way system. As we found, my wife and I driving on a road recently, we can't go down there, but you're telling us we can. It's very narrow at the moment, and there's lots of discussion about where it could go and how it could evolve and how intelligent we could get there. But at the moment, it's certainly not very intelligent. And then fourthly, one that's quite controversial, if I had a group of people engaged in AI, it's not about to take over the world. Some would argue it is and we're working towards it. Others very much more dubious, and I would include myself in the latter there. And yet I'm engaged in those kind of conversations because I'm more concerned about, okay, I don't believe we're going to get there, but in the attempt to try and get there, what messes could we get ourselves into? And I'd much rather be part of the conversation to help try and turn things around than just say, you're off your rocker, I'm going to withdraw from the conversation at that point. So, what AI is not. It's not new, artificial intelligence about to take over the world. What about some of the applications? I'm sure some of you have encountered this already and know and have experienced some of it. But firstly, just to highlight some in the world of education, we're seeing opportunities to use AI in personalized learning, really kind of understanding where the students are and kind of tailoring syllabuses, curriculum and so forth. The very scheduling of and delivery of education and assessment. AI is beginning to be drawn in to help kind of automate some of those processes whilst supposedly bringing an element of personalization. Criminal justice, we're seeing how DNA analysis can be worked on by AI to give us new leads or to predict the risk of, say, a defendant fleeing. All the way down to, again, automation, case allocation to various courts and panels and so forth. The administrative side of things, AI being used for. In employment and jobs and work, as we've seen from our word cloud, one that's perhaps really hit the headlines recently, those jobs that are fairly repetitive are certainly prime areas for AI to be introduced. So if you're a church leader, and I've said this over a number of years now, you're saying, well, how is this going to affect the person in my pew or in the rows of chairs before me on a Sunday? Actually, if you've got an Amazon distribution depot or some such warehouse near you, there could be the very risk, and a certain proportion of your congregation working there, there could be a very strong risk that they could all be made redundant, and we're just going to load the AIs in to do all that manual work, which for many communities may be the kind of core employer. So those repetitive tasks are prime areas for AI to be introduced. Performance monitoring, application reviews and so forth, other areas in the world of work, to name but three, highlight but three this afternoon. And then health. Health is another big one, and I'm going to share a more specific example shortly, but helping with diagnostics, interpretation of x-rays and radiology results. I have a couple of consultants on the master's program that I lead at the moment who are saying, yes, absolutely, this is coming in strong and steady at the moment to see AI help to lift that burden, and we might be involved or pulled in on certain cases where a little bit more tricky, where we still need that human intuition, insight to build upon and interpret further what the AIs have identified through the results. That helps to lead into this phrase that I've already used this afternoon about machine learning. This is where AI really in the last couple of decades has really set off and really kind of transformed, and why it's perhaps feeling as if this is all new. Machine learning, living in a digital age where our computers are becoming more and more powerful. I haven't got my phone on me at the moment, it's in my bag, but you can hold in your hand a computer which probably, I can remember a desktop computer that I had that probably took up half a desk. That wasn't as powerful as my phone. We're living in a digital age. Computational power is increasing exponentially. We've got the opportunities here for machine learning, which is what? And there's this quote here, which I appreciate those at the back, if you can read that. You are super intelligent, and you are already a robot. So let me read it briefly to you. In machine learning, instead of specifying human comprehensible rules by which AIs find solutions and problems, we set them to work and experiment and see what works well with the data that they've been given. So the machines are beginning to work on the data to bring out insight and understanding to us. And so that means that actually the new gold in all of this is data. Data is the new gold. I've been to many conferences, but I remember one particular one where the president of the National Statistical Society was there, and he was saying, look, I really have concerns about AI, but I'm also quite happy about AI. One being the fact that it's actually made data sexy. I now am being invited to conferences to talk about numbers and data and stats to people that I've never ever encountered. Data and numbers suddenly have become the new gold. And this also gives us each of us in this room, another kind of piece of the action in this conversation. Because who creates much of the data that's in our world? Who is linked to much of the data that's created in our world? Us. It's our phones. Whether we tick the little box to say, don't track me when I'm using the app, there is still some data being collected. And it's our data that's being used. So it might be a very lofty claim to say, so rise up, people, it's our data, protect it, and we are going to be able to kind of transform how AI develops. It might be quite lofty. It might be a bit of a David and Goliath scenario. But we do need to be more mindful, I think, about where our data is going. How many of us, when we get the latest Apple phone update, scroll through, accept, I'll email it and then I'll read it later, having accepted it, which it doesn't make sense, does it? But we need to be careful about where our data is going and how it's being used. So data and algorithms, the ways in which those machines work on that data is what's powering much of the new stuff that we're hearing lots more about. And it breaks down to the three main ways. Unsupervised learning, where we basically let the AIs work away on the data and they check out a result, which sounds great, but actually we don't know how the machine has ended up with that result. So we have this, what's known as a black box problem. Well, okay, that's the result, but how has the machine worked out? The days of maths exams show you're working, computers show you're working. We don't know that. And as we'll see very shortly, so the opportunities for fairness, for bias, for how have we got to that result, why is the AI suggesting that result, is something that is of concern. Reinforcement learning, almost giving the AIs, okay, this is the data that we want you to work on, this is what we know, but explore it, see what new insights, what's some of the best answers that you can improve upon the human interpretation and problem that's set before you. So reinforcement learning, reinforcing what we know, but opening up the machine to consider what new insights it could bring for us. And supervised learning, giving it kind of this right answers. This is how we work out a solution. This is how we interpret things. You go away and you learn that. And it's almost, the reference standard is our understanding, our decisions, that the AI can perhaps do in a much faster way, in an automated way. And to pick up on that third one very quickly, an example that's happened in the last year, trials begin of an AI scan that could reduce the risk of stillbirth and other conditions, routine antenatal data, ultrasound measures and so forth, a whole load of features around the beginning of life stages, test results that are taken with pregnant women. Those features are then labelled and with the presence or the absence of specific adverse outcomes such as stillbirth. And then the computer learns to identify those things, and an output is a risk score, where you're going to be higher risk or lower risk of this happening, of a stillbirth occurring. And why that is so such an improvement on what's gone before is the consultant's human time investment in doing all of that. Actually, the AI can do much faster, so it's providing that level of care in a much quicker, more efficient response. I mentioned labels there. Note that I'm going to come back to labels and AI very shortly. So as we come into land, okay, Matt, these are some of, in our helicopter journey, I'm pointing out some of the scenic points and thinking, oh, this is great, and that's great, and that's great. What's the problem with all of this? Well, let's turn to the great mind, Stephen Hawking, who said, the rise of powerful AI will either be the best or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity. We don't yet know which. There's both the positives and the negatives. There are those that are really pursuing that sense that AI is going to take over the world. When we ask about, well, should robots be given rights? They say, wrong question. Will robots give us the right to vote? It's that whole, will they take over and will they rule us? There are lots of things to do to consider. So ethics and AI, which is kind of my domain, and I know Trish, who's with us, is doing an awful lot of work in this area as well. Jobin is but one body of work that just helps to give us that overview today. Some of the emerging ethical issues that we need to be thinking about are in terms of privacy, Transparency, as I was saying earlier, those unsupervised learning, black box problems. Well, how has the machine got to that result? We want to know. Privacy, transparency, justice and fairness. There's lots of talk about AI. Well, we can bring AI in because it will be able to make unbiased decisions. Well, AI works with data, but it works with algorithms. And who codes the algorithms? Humans. So those same level of bias could still creep in to a biased algorithm. So there's a responsibility there for us to be thinking, where is this going? What does it mean to be human? When I talk to my students, but also others, church members, churches that have asked me to talk about this, and if there's nothing else that I want you to go away from this afternoon knowing or questioning, it's holding this question in your mind. What does it mean to be human? In the face of all this, what does it mean to be human in a technological world? And that leads us nicely to come into land now. A theology of AI, or at least the beginnings of a theology of AI. Lots going on. And I know we've recommended some books in the bookshop to accompany this session. John Lennox's book is a great start, a great primer in this. But some three features I think that at least help. We haven't got stools, but we have got stands, microphone stands, with kind of three legs to them, three aspects that I think help to give us a basis for a theology of AI. Firstly, a fulfillment of God's command. This is not something for us to be frightened of, but being innovative, using technology is part of who we are. But we, the humans, must remain in control. I think that's part of God's design. Technology, if we step out from kind of the very digitally saturated understanding of technology to understanding technology to be as simple as the water wheel, as the hammer and chisel. You know, technology is something that God has given to us to be innovative, to be creative with. And with that understanding, that mandate, let's be responsible, let's think that through. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we could open up a concordance and say, where's AI? Right, I find the reference, and there we are. But actually, if we open up the first book of the Bible, Genesis, we see a lesson in science, technology, engineering, and maths, STEM subjects. We see that in the Tower of Babel, things going wrong, where humanity say, let's make a name for ourselves, let's build this tower, united society, speaking one language, all of that. Technology gone bad. But equally in Genesis, we see a massive STEM project in the form of building a big boat that's completely contrary and completely unexpected and no precursor to in Noah and the ark. Technology is there in the first book of the Bible. And we need to receive that and see that as being something that God has given to us, but we need to use responsibly. Secondly, we are image bearers. God has breathed into us, not technology. Breathed into us. We've heard reference to that in the big top this morning. I think speaking about speaking and declaration. God has breathed into us, not technologies. Humans and AI are different. There is something special. Jesus didn't come as an AI. He didn't have a loud megaphone system that he spoke from heaven into earth. He actually came in human form. Jesus came to earth and moved into the neighborhood, as Eugene Peterson has put it for us. That opening chapter in John, the Gospel of John. Jesus took on human form. There's something special about this, special about who we are. Jesus took on human form, and that really is something special. We are to celebrate our humanness. And then thirdly, in all things gospel, the church is not God's only inheritance. We have a world out there to redeem, to go out, to fill all in all, as that reference in Colossians talks about. He's king over all, he's in all things. It's all things gospel. And we're due to use technology to help fill that with the glory of God. And so in doing that, adopting what I call a non-naive optimism. A non-naive. We're not so naive. This is going to be wonderful. AI is wonderful. I'm not saying that. Let's not be naive. But let's also be optimistic to see this as a tool for us to glorify God, to go out into all the earth. And then finally, just some ways in which this might actually affect us as the church congregation. There's lots of different things I think AI could be used for in terms of our admin, making it more efficient, allowing us to get on to do more of that human interactions thing, decision making, where AIs can help with sharpen our strategy and our thinking, our modeling, problem solving expertise, in terms of evangelism, perhaps working with data of our local communities and finding out where there's real needs and see perhaps where patterns and trends were emerging that wouldn't necessarily have been recognised, perhaps opening up fresh ways for engagement. And I say personalised comms, you know, I'm sure we've all heard that illustration of that letter that was generated by an AI, you know, dear ID 85251, we really appreciate you and value you. And you're thinking, yeah, you can't even know my name. But we can. Things have improved since those days. We can use perhaps AI in helping us to improve our communications, personalising our communications in fresh ways. That's the end of our helicopter journey. One final slide from me, and I will keep this one up on screen for longer. Some of you may have come across Padlet. Padlet allows you to create online walls where you can post things. And I've created a Padlet for this afternoon to help you continue that conversation. So there's on that Padlet articles, recommended reading, YouTube clips, some suggestions of films. Go to that. I own it. I commit to keeping it active for the next 12 months. You can use that, hopefully, as a way of continuing this conversation. And I put a link on that Padlet for Wired magazine, a really quick, easy throwaway for you to think, well, how do I take this further? Why don't you, if you've got a group of people in your church that really are fascinated by this, say, look, for 6 months, for 12 months, let's each buy a copy of Wired every month, read it, and then, as the late John Stott used to say, engage in some double listening. How does what I read in this speak to what I read in my Bible? And begin that conversation with each other and with the Word of God. It's not easy necessarily, but I think we need to dig deep and we need to get that understanding and build up our theological understanding of what it needs to be human in a technological world. Let's move now into some further discussion, an opportunity for you to engage. What I'd like us to do is to move into kind of smaller groups, and I think we're going to do it more like rows as opposed to twos or threes because there's such a great number of you with us. What I'd like us to look at is three areas, the areas of health, work, and privacy. And in your three groups is Phil, Richard, and perhaps Dal. Could you be available to just host? These guys don't know the answers, neither do I, but just giving you a more open space to begin to think through some of these issues. I've given each group 2 questions, but don't be boxed in by those questions. Have an opportunity to discuss, how does this sit with me? What are my immediate reactions? But then within those groups, I've got a question about health. In the work one, what does this mean for work? And what does it mean for privacy? And begin that conversation and be open to share your ideas, thoughts, responses, because it's as others share, we learn from each other as we share and as we interact with one another. So how are we going to divide up? Let's say, or certainly if we take the, and a fourth group that we could look at is kind of the future of humanity. What does this mean for being human? And so perhaps if the back block and the 3 rows from there, if you could look at humanity and what it means to be human, and then we're going to do perhaps the first 4 or 5 rows here for health. And I'm losing track of myself here now. Right, okay, so if we still keep with that black, the back block and the first 3 rows on that, looking at humanity, and I will come and kind of just host that and guide that through with you. And then I think if Phil, and you know your groups, don't you? If you divide up and make your selections and just pull people together into those smaller groups now, to help with the sustainability and to be environmentally friendly, the hosts have got a couple of the questions in printed form, but you'll also find on the Padlet a PDF version of the questions. But as I say, there's only 2, and the whole idea is to help to focus on discussion. Okay, let's take about 10, 15 minutes on that, and then we'll have a bit of a plenary before we conclude. If I can just draw us back as one group. You don't need to move your chairs, just stay in those groups. But if you direct your focus back to the front, we just want to spend, hopefully that's worked. Thank you for your patience just as we got the group sorted. I just know from experience, just throwing it open to Q&A can sometimes be a bit off-putting. Some people feel actually able to share a little bit openly, a bit more freely in a smaller group than a massive group. So we've got you starting to exchange views, ideas, thoughts, responses to those respective areas. And of course, there are many other areas of life that AI is affecting us, but health, employment and jobs, privacy, and just the future of humanity. Hopefully, at least a starter for 4. Rather than 10. I'm going to pass the mic to Daryl now, and for the last 10 minutes, all 3 of us are going to assume these perches. We're not perching as if to assume we know everything, so be kind. But if there are any questions, comments that you would like to ask, and we'll have a big group conversation for all of the last 10, 15 minutes that we have together, because again, we can learn from one another, learn from the responses, ideas that are shared. So be kind.
Yeah, in reality, we'll see, we may get just a couple of questions in, but we'll do our best. So if you've got a particular one that's burning, then you want to give me a little wave, and I will bring you the microphone, and you can fire away, and we'll get the discussion panel involved. So anyone got any questions at the moment? Let's start down here. Thank you.
So, how do we protect ourselves from the dangers of AI?
Yeah, we had a really interesting discussion in our group around that, and I think I'm actually going to direct this at Matt, but add in a couple of other points. So when we were talking about privacy, some of the interesting initial discussion was about some positives, but we found ourselves gravitating towards quite a bit of alarm, actually, at how our data could be used by sort of maybe a government that may be not working in the best interests of the citizens, maybe not now, maybe in 50 or 100 years' time. You know, the vast power that they might have over our lives, potentially to even stop people buying certain products, because it'll be integrated perhaps with a cashless system, and just feels like there's an awful lot of power wielded. And so the question is, what protections are there in place? You know, are the big tech companies really the ones in control? Do the governments really have the control? Will we be able to keep trusting governments? All these sorts of questions. You know, can you give us some reassurance, Matt?
Yeah, come on, Matt.
Yeah. Oh, is that the time? Well, these are all really good questions. That's why I think it's so good that we, at an event like this, we are having the conversation, because we need to be asking these questions and wrestling with trying to find the answers. I know a good friend that I was hoping would be around, Trish. She's there. Trish and I are involved in various ways. Within the European scene, there is a real desire to want to work out, wrestle with, and try and design what is ethical AI, with the idea that perhaps when we might say we believe in, say, German engineering or American hospitality, it might be in the field of AI that Europe, and the UK particularly, could lead on what is the shape and the design of what ethical AI looks like. And so to reassure that conversation is taking place, within the UK scene for AI as well, there is a desire and almost the opportunity to start saying, well, could we lead on? For whatever reason, actually, we've got a good standing in terms of ethical thought, development in terms of medical ethics. Could we use the basis of that to start shaping some ethical AI design, legislation, policy that is taking place? And there is some good stuff happening. I think Trish would agree. It's still kind of 7 principles is a great starting point, but if 7 principles a student wrote an essay on, for me, I would be saying, look, delve deeper. What does this mean in reality? Which I'm sure you're all of a similar mind. Well, okay, privacy, fairness, great things to be aware of, but what does this mean in reality? So things are happening. It is being taken seriously by government, and there is hope. But by us as citizens raising our awareness and understanding of that and saying this is important to us, it's a good start. We're not ignorant.
Thank you. I guess on the flip side of that, just thinking about Stuart saying this morning about needing spirit-filled, oil-filled teachers, bankers, etc. This is another field where actually we want to be encouraging
ethical programmers who can design beautiful code, but ethically good code.
So maybe rather than stand on the outside going, well, that's wrong, how do I get on the inside of this and make a difference? Yeah. Thank you. I think I saw a hand on my peripheral vision down here. I'll come to the man in the jumper and then I'll come back there to Tessa as well. Sorry, was somebody just adding something in my ear just there?
I was just going to say that we did have a computer scientist in our group who was talking about this particular issue and whether, there'd be like a Hippocratic type oath that was developed where, people would have some kind of sense of ethical basis,
Yeah.
Just briefly add to the Hippocratic Oath idea. Unlike doctors, lawyers, accountants that are independent and come in as kind of independent experts, often you find, having worked for Global FTSE, often you find programmers, they're just given a project initiation document and say, do that, and if you don't do it, you're fired. So they have very little control over the outcomes they finally produce, because the powers that be from on top say, this is how I want it done, this is how I'm going to do it, and they're designing it intentionally with addiction, attention deficit, all in mind, to really draw people in and make sure people are using their tools.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. At the beginning, you didn't mention anything about Alan Turing and the Turing test. Could you comment on that, please?
Is this on? This on? Yes, it is. Absolutely. A key thinker. I think in my helicopter journey, I was really trying to pull out some salient points. But no, absolutely, he was key, instrumental to this whole development. And much of his work, the Turing test, I don't want to go into too much detail, but to make it accessible for all, but a significant guy and significant thinker in terms of the development of AI and the Turing test to ascertain a level of intelligence. Is the machine, is the device we've designed intelligent or not? Very important. I think probably for time, Google him if you're not familiar with him. That will only add further to your understanding of AI. But the Turing test and all that encompasses is being revisited, rethought, and the importance of that, all the more important as these advances take place and continue.
Thank you.
Hi. It was really great, by the way, so thank you. I just had a question around the ethics and AI, because you mentioned Jobin and the sort of 5 concepts. And I was just kind of curious as to the kind of legalistic side of AI and how we can sort of create policies and procedures around sort of the legalization of it and where that's coming from, because obviously our laws are created from sort of initially the 10 Commandments and then sort of going back. So it has like predated, but this sort of needs a new legalism. So I was just wondering sort of where is the underpinning and coming from and how is that kind of being created?
Right, okay. Signpost you to Trish because she's a lawyer and she's specialising in this. But this is a whole major, rapidly emerging field of work. Yes, we realise we've got to try and for many of these new technologies, AI and all manner of other related issues, our regulatory frameworks almost are out of date, and how do we kind of reconceive what we mean by legal and so forth in a globalized world, because we can say in the UK we do this and this, and we don't do this, this and this, but in Europe they may choose to do something completely different. So lots of work, but yeah, Signpost need to have a word with Trish because she's working in this field.
Anything, little soundbite you want to add to that, Trish, for us? Because it'd be great to have some insight.
I think it's really important that this conference is actually called Awaken, because now is the time for us all to wake up. As Matt has already suggested, that we need to be not naive but optimistic. And by not being naive, I believe that we need to be more actively engaged in holding these technologies and those that create them to account, whether they be the individual code programmers, whether they be the big FTSE 50 corporates, whether they be in the West or in the East. It doesn't really matter. We need to be holding them to account. So in the last few weeks alone, the UN announced that they're going to have a global initiative for AI governance across many member states, including Russia in that mix, which is all a bit confusing. But hey-ho. But the reality is governments are worried about this as well, and they are thinking about this. So the challenge is for us as a body of people, a body of Christ, coming together. What is our response? What's God's response? How does he want us, every individual in this room, to act and be a part of this? Because we can't just step back and say, I'm happy for this to flood over me. I'm happy for this to just be and do and make decisions about me and drive my car and heat my house. What is our response, and how do we choose that wisely with discernment? And that's my call to all of you for today.
Wonderful. Yeah, please feel free. Thank you. Obviously, time has gone for us, and there is another seminar that's following hot on the heels, so we can't extend this one. But if you do want to come down and have a chat to any of the guys here or to Trish just at the end, even if they can point you in the right direction to some other things that'll be helpful, I'm sure they'll be happy to do so. Some great resources out there. Two things. Firstly, can we say a big thanks to these guys and to Trish for her contributions as well, which is great. I'd love to just, give a shout out. This was such an easy session to lead, because when I was in touch with these guys, Matt was all over it. And Matt, I just want to say I thought you'd done a brilliant job for us today. So thank you, Matt. Thank you for being here. If you would be so kind as to lend a hand to roughly put your chair back in the right place. And we've got a brilliant bunch of stewards who will do the rest, but if we can save them all the lugging, I'm sure they'd appreciate it. God bless you guys and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.